Lion, thanks for joining me today. Great to have you on the Mark to Mind show.
Great to be here, Mark. It's a true pleasure.
Yeah, and it took us a while to kind of zoom up the technology here. We had to switch platforms. I don't know why that happened, but gosh, this whole podcasting thing has been a pretty interesting ordeal. Do you have a show of your own?
I'm building one.
You're building one.
Yeah, this will go on it.
Okay,
so
good. Right on.
so
First
I'm
episode.
yes, that's exactly right. I'm building my own podcast, but it was great to see all the guests you've had on. Charles Eisenstein is one of my
Oh,
favorite
he's great.
heroes these days, and
Yeah,
lots of other people talking about mindset, and that's my area of specialty as well. So great
right.
to be part of the crowd.
Well, I'm excited to talk to you. I mean, we have a lot in common. Obviously, we're both involved in coaching and involved in trying to clear up, limiting beliefs and all that. And you're an expert at that, probably far more than I am. And also, I've had a lot of narcissists in my life, so I'm anxious to talk about that. I see that's an area of interest of yours as well.
Yes, I call myself a recovering narcissist.
Well, there's probably quite a few of those out there, but I think we kind of cultivate that in our culture. We're a culture of me and individuality, and that's been going on for a long time. So narcissism's kind of baked into it. So I want to talk about that too. But let's first, I mean, you're from Petaluma, California. You've always been a California guy. What's your kind of origin story? Where are you from, and what were some of the things that got you interested in the work you do?
I grew up in a little western town called Denver, Colorado.
Oh yeah, small place.
It got bigger and bigger as I grew up. So I moved to Boulder for college and spent 8 years in Boulder, which was a much better place than Denver, even though it was only an hour away. Got my degree in physiology and human consciousness. And as far
Wow.
as I know, it was one of the first degrees in consciousness studies ever granted. That was in
Is that
1975.
University of Colorado Boulder, or what
Yes.
school was it?
Yeah, University of Colorado
It's pretty
Boulder.
impressive that they had that.
Well, I created it actually. They had a program where if you were one of those wild kids that they couldn't satisfy with their regular program, you could create your own major. So that's what I did. I said, these are all the classes I want to take. This is what makes up my major. They said, good, get some professors to approve. So I went around and found 3 great professors, and they went, yeah, sure, go ahead. So that was great. I really crafted my own education.
That's really neat. So did you go from there right into coaching, or what was your like the career path look like?
Well, nobody was hiring people with degrees in consciousness studies at the time.
Yeah, right.
Because
What it was.
there weren't any. so I actually went on the road selling stuff for people that sold jewelry and gift items, and because I really didn't know what else to do.
Sure.
And I traveled for about a year and a half around the Southwest United States until one day I picked up a guy whose car had broken down in the Mojave Desert. And make a very long story short, three nights later, he pulled out a gun and shot me in the head 4 times.
What?
Yeah. That was my response as well when it happened. Like,
I can imagine. Holy shit. Oh, well, you're standing here, so obviously this isn't like a reincarnation, so you survived it.
well, it felt kind of like a reincarnation, only I didn't have to go through the diaper stage again.
Jeez.
So I not only survived, but we ended up talking for 8 hours after the incident. And that's a whole
God.
story that's been written and published widely, and a film has been made about it. But one of the things that happened was I was out of body, looking down at the scene
Mhm.
and thinking how amusing these 2 people are in this van, one of them shooting the other one. So that was a big shift in consciousness, because I realized, oh, I'm not my body.
Right.
And as much as I had studied consciousness, this was the first time I was completely conscious out of body.
Mhm.
And that set me off back into the study of human psychology, neurology, spirituality. And I ended up taking more than 100 workshops, trainings, and studying with teachers of all kinds over the next 30 years. And at the same time, I became a professional headhunter, which is kind of ironic after having my head hunted. But
A bad joke. Put a book.
yes, but that was my career for 25 years, all the time while I was also exploring these other things.
Right.
So it wasn't until the economy took us down during the dot bomb
Right.
that my headhunting business went out of business, and I didn't know what to do. And a girlfriend of mine said, well, "Why don't you become a coach?" And I said, "I don't know anything about coaching." She said, "Yeah, of course you do. You've been coaching executives for 25 years and you've done all this inner study. Here, you can become a coach." So that was the beginning of my coaching career about 20 plus years ago. And I fell in love with it because it's exactly what I want to do. And I also teach other coaches my methodology.
Right. Now, coaching is, back then, it was pretty, I mean, what year are we talking about? Like in the early 2000s, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
2001.
Coaching, was like high-end executive coaching or nothing back then, or therapy, right? Life coaching was kind of a very nascent thing. I mean, there was some kind of new agey stuff going on, but not a whole lot. And even fitness coaching was relatively new, and there wasn't much in between. So what was it like for you? What did you get certified? Did you find a methodology, or just kind of like create your own coaching process, or what did that look like for you?
I used everything I had learned in personal development in my coaching, and I also knew about business and careers because I'd been coaching in that field. So it started off with people interested in changing careers, and then I started getting deeper because I was fascinated by depth. It's like, what's underneath that stuff going on in your life?
Right.
And so I began applying all these tools I had learned until I realized, oh my gosh, I have a whole methodology here.
Right.
And the methodology that actually goes down deep into the subconscious mind, clears out what's in the way, and frees people so that they can actually accomplish what they want. And I got so interested in it, I put a real study on beliefs themselves. What are they? Where do they come from? How do they manifest? How do they work? I tried lots of different belief change technologies because I realized that's the greatest leverage. If I could change somebody's core belief, they could change everything in their life. And so that's what got me focused on that particular area.
That's really interesting. So before I kind of get into like that process, I would like to talk about coaching a little bit more, because I think a lot of people, especially since COVID and with the Great Resignation, have looked for more freedom, autonomy, and for ways to make a living and earn, to find meaning without being tied to a job. And so coaching has suddenly become really interesting to people. So what does it mean to be? What does a coach do, and what does a great coach do, and what does it take to be effective as a coach from your perspective?
I think there's two kinds of coaches. There's coaches that traffic in information, and coaches that traffic in transformation. Mm-hmm. And the ones that are involved with transformation, they're really trying to help the person change their lives completely and clear out what the problem areas are. Most coaches are not trained for this, however, because coaching schools basically have the philosophy that we only deal with the present and the future. Where's the person now? Where do they want to go? We're going to help them get there to the future. Let's leave the past to the therapists, psychotherapists, psychiatrists of the world. We're not dealing with that stuff. Mm-hmm. Now, the problem with that philosophy, and that's pretty common among coaching schools, is that the stuff that keeps people from moving forward, the junk that gets in their way, all was formed in the past.
Right.
And so my methodology is a coaching methodology, but it's one that has tremendous therapeutic value because we go back into the source material where that belief or pattern started, and we clear it from the subconscious mind. And we clear it not just from the mind, but from the body, the spirit, the emotions. So it's a complete cleansing of that particular pattern. And the person doesn't have the pattern in their life anymore afterwards. So that's what makes the transformational shift, is they are basically a different person because they're believing something different about themselves or about the world or about other people.
How would you define a person?
Well, I have a pretty
consciousness, right? And spirit. So what does that mean to be a person? What is that? What is a person? I mean, it's not, most people think, well, that's a silly question. A person is a body, right? But it's not a body, right? What is a person? What was the person of you that were looking down in your body? I mean, that's a unique perspective.
Exactly. Well, I talk about the fact that we are multidimensional beings. Like right now, you're seeing, hearing, feeling, touching, you're in your body, you're experiencing your experience. And I'm over here experiencing my experience. And we're looking through this technology that allows us to connect. So we are physical beings, emotional beings, mental beings, spiritual beings, relational beings, energetic beings. We have all of these things going on at once. And so for me, the true self is the whole self with nothing left out. And there's a lot of people focused on one area. Like I'll do health coaching and help their body, or I'll do emotional coaching and they'll beat on a pillow and get their emotions out, or I'll change their mind with this mental technology. But until you see the person as a whole with all their systems that are all integrated and part of something bigger, then you're going to be missing something. You're going to not be seeing the whole person, because we do also belong in an environment. We're environmental beings. We're in an ecosystem. We're connected to nature. We're connected to everything. And it's the delusion of separateness that really screws with us when we believe that we're separate beings, because then we lose our connection to everything around us.
All right. So you just brought up a really interesting point that has nothing to do with coaching. This idea of a separate person versus being not a separate person, because my experience is that as well. But my perspective is that because we're not separate beings, we also have no separate self. What there is basically consciousness streaming through this instrument that has unique conditioning that we mistake to be an individuated self, aka a person. And this is what causes suffering in the world. This is what causes the mistake. It's a mistaken identity.
I couldn't say it any better myself.
Okay, good. So we're on the same sheet of music. So when we recognize, but it's very hard to go there in a coaching relationship when someone is so, because I mean, 99 points, 10 digits to the right percent of humanity is completely conditioned to believe that the separate self is extant, right? Yes. There is a unique version. There is something called Mark in this body, right? And they think it's a soul, or it's a unique spirit or something. But the more work you do and the more spiritual development you do, the more you realize that that's false, right? And so, but you can't start there with somebody, right? You can't, because they think you're nuts.
It's true.
So how do you engage? How do you engage in a relationship to get someone to really break down their ego structures when they spent their whole life building those ego structures up?
Well, first of all, if your job is to break down ego structures, you're going to get in trouble. Mm-hmm. People are going to nail you to a cross, or hang you, or run you on a rail outside, tarred and feathered. All right. So you can't change somebody's beliefs or commitments without their permission, because otherwise you're violating their free will. Right. On the other hand, what I've found is that I can help a person see their own subconscious mind and how it works. And so they can begin to deconstruct on their own. Exactly. What's not working for them. Exactly. And that can be done through inquiry and philosophical discussions and guided imagery and that kind of tools we use to help a person recognize, okay, I'm more than just my conscious self. There's a lot going on at the subconscious level that's driving my behavior, driving my conditions, driving what I choose and why I choose it. And now I can begin seeing that I am more than my conscious ego self. That's the first crack in the concrete. Yeah. And then that process can keep going and go, wow, I'm not just my subconscious and conscious mind. There's also a superconscious mind. There's also something beyond me that's higher than me, that's grander than me. And so this awakening is really the purpose of what I do, is to take people through processes in which they do awaken to who they really are. And that is always beyond the ego self. Mm-hmm. And the ego self is simply the identification with the beliefs, the mental models, the constructs, the biases, all that conditioning, and identifying that as me. Exactly. And that's what I refer to as beliefs, but all those other words function for the same thing: the paradigms, the frames, the maps of meaning. Yeah. So that's the infrastructure of consciousness. It's down at the infrastructure level. It's like the pipes underneath the ground. We don't see them, but they deliver water to our faucets, So this infrastructure of consciousness, the belief structure, is the machinery of the human operating system. And that's where things are being driven. 95 to 97% of our choices and actions every day are driven by that subconscious programming. So when you start examining your subconscious programming, you're getting to see a bigger part of yourself, who you are. And you also get some choice in the matter, because you say, oh, wow, that's my machinery. I don't have to do what my machinery tells me to do.
Right. So the tricky part about this, Lion, is, the term subconscious, leads you to think, okay, it's beyond my consciousness. It's beneath my consciousness, right? So therefore, I'm not aware of it. So how can we examine something that we're not aware of?
Well, it's like a submarine. Subconscious means below the surface, right? So you can actually do it quite easily. I have lots of exercises that I give to people to begin examining their beliefs. One of the simplest is called the belief self-diagnosis, which I have in my ebooks. I give this away by the thousands because it's so effective. You take a topic that you're having a problem with, like love, and you simply say, what I believe about love is, and then you listen to your mind. And what things will start popping up, and you write them down. What I believe about love is it's really hard. Okay, you write that down. What I believe about love is I'll never find it. You write that down. What I believe about love is it's a joke. You write that down. What I believe about love is it's the most important thing, and then you write that down. And if you
but aren't those conscious? I mean, if they're coming to you and you're aware of them, then that's conscious. You're consciously thinking about it.
You are bringing them from the subconscious up to the conscious mind. That's what this stimulus does, is it invites your mind to respond, because it's all there. It's just it's below your conscious level, but it doesn't take a lot to bring it up from the subconscious.
Interesting.
Yeah,
I don't want to get stuck in semantics, and I agree with that. Yeah, I mean, you're using the common, the accepted language, and for me, I believe consciousness is the totality of experience, right? It's the life force, the prana, the chi that is flowing through you. It is both intelligent as well as energizes or innervates the body. Whereas what you're talking about is cognition, right? It's what is cognized by the brain, which means you can create language or meaning around it. And so there's cognition that is cognized with the brain. There's cognition that is cognized with the heart, which has neurological processing capacity, and the biome. And then bringing it all together, is what you called whole man, right? Being able to utilize those different intelligence capacities and to make meaning out of them, right? To be able to verbalize and to understand certain things. And I know it's semantics, but it's interesting to me, because this whole field can get kind of murky, and a lot of people use different language, and so then people get turned off because, like, I don't even know what the hell they're talking about, right? Like subconscious, super conscious, and you could say, well, what do you mean by super conscious? Is like, is there some sort of like overlord in my mind that's like, it's like the devil on one shoulder and the angel on the other? Is that what we're talking about? Or so super consciousness is just basically getting your ego out of the way and allowing, the pure awareness to flow through, and to, and it's all there. Love, bliss, Sat Chit Ananda, this is the Eastern concept. It's not something that is part of your intellect. It's just your very nature as a being.
There was a statistician named George Box who said all models are wrong. That's and right. Some are useful. So
I like that. Yeah,
you're right. It is semantics. Right? It is semantics, because we are language-based humans. Right. Language is a particular behavior set that we all engage in.
Right.
Beliefs start forming before you have language. A baby in the womb can recognize the difference between the mother and father's voice. And it's the pattern recognition system that begins to build a self. This is who I am. This is what I do. This is how I respond to people. And so when I talk about beliefs, I'm talking about all of the patterns that were set from your womb to now. Right. And who knows, possibly in past lives too. We don't know about that. But these patterns can be recognized. They can be brought up from the subconscious mind, below conscious. And then there's also universal patterns we call archetypes. Carl Jung talked about this, right? There's the great myths and stories, and we have a king in us, and we have a queen in us, and we have a joker in us. And so those are also patterns in the culture, because we're not just individuals, we're also part of a culture. And those archetypes are also useful to use when you're examining yourself. Know thyself. That's what it said, in the great Greek temples. And that's the goal, is just get to know more and more and more and more of yourself. And that self becomes bigger and bigger and bigger until it encompasses the whole world, until it becomes pure awareness. And then you can hang out there, at least for a little while, until you have the next thing to do.
Or another way you could say that is that the self that you thought you were gets smaller and smaller and smaller until the universal self is the experience.
Sure. And we also have to function in the world. So
that's right. Exactly. You're not just going to, at that point, go off into a cave in Tibet and just being blissed out, right? We still have to make money, and we still have to be in the world. Okay, that's awesome. So with your system of clearing beliefs, and I love the word, the beliefs to me is like one piece of what we're talking about, because language is another one. I use the term background of obviousness, and that came from computers and cognition. The idea is that all of this stuff, all this conditioning you're talking about, is so baked into your sense of self and your perceptual capabilities that you're completely blind to it, but it's obvious to others.
Yes.
And so language is a part of that, how we construct concepts, mental models, like you said. And then what traditionally people think about beliefs are like beliefs about money or sex or relationships or something like that. But there's so much more to it than that. And when all the emotional patterns that get stuck as well.
Right. When I use the term beliefs, I'm talking about that infrastructure, the pattern recognition and making use of patterns system. It is the word I use instead of mental models, but it doesn't matter what you call it. We're all operating on those mental models.
Right.
And
it's
we're
like the
operating
base operating
them.
system. Right.
And we're operating through them because we see through them, we perceive through them. And that's why turning the light around and examining them is so useful. Is because you can see, wow, I'm perceiving that person through this lens, and that's causing me to react to them in a certain way. And that changes behavior.
What are some of the most important or common models or beliefs that people have challenges with? I mentioned a few, obviously relationships and sex and love, obviously there, but what else have you found that are like the big rocks that if you can turn over those rocks and do some excavating underneath that lead to big transformative changes?
Well, we do use the term excavation because that's a lot of what it feels like and sounds like. The most common belief I've found all around the world, and I've lectured and talked all around the world, is there's something wrong with me.
Yes.
And I have a suggestion for you in the audience, if you'd like to try something out.
Sure.
Okay. So close your eyes for a moment and feel what it feels like to hold the belief there's something wrong with me. Now, another part of you knows that there's not, but just feel it as if it's 100% true and see what it feels like in your body. There's something wrong with me.
Yeah, it's a negative belief. And so it's going to, or feels contracting, limiting, and de-energizing.
Yeah. And most people experience something like that. They may have it in different parts of their body, but that's pretty common. Okay. So like take that off as if it's an outfit of clothing that made you feel lousy and throw it to the side. And now close your eyes and feel what it feels like to hold the belief, I am a sacred and worthy being.
Yeah.
What does that feel like in your body?
Light, energy releasing, expansive.
Great. So we've just proven that our beliefs create our experience.
Right. For sure.
And you can try on beliefs and see how they feel. And you can try on the beliefs that you have and try on the beliefs that other people have. It actually makes you more empathetic to other people who are holding those beliefs. But once you feel it, you can go, oh, now I recognize it. So the belief must be something wrong with me is very ancient, because when you're an infant, you're looking around at other people who can feed themselves, but you can't. They can walk and talk, but you can't. And infants come to this conclusion, not verbally, because it's pre-verbal, but they come to an experiential conclusion. Well, there must be something wrong with me because I can't do that.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's one of the earliest beliefs we take on as individual selves, is comparing ourselves to others and thinking that it's our problem. Now, if you have a great parent, they pick you up and go, "It's okay, honey. You're a baby. You're going to be growing and learning and being able to do all these things. You're fine. Just relax. You're okay. This is the process." But most of us didn't get that. We had to figure it out on our own. And beliefs should have expiration dates, like meat at the meat counter.
Right.
This belief will expire in 5 years, or when you can talk, whichever comes sooner. But they don't. They just get pushed down by other beliefs into the subconscious mind. And so we have these, like, if each one's a snowflake, we have these snowdrifts of beliefs that we've taken on or concluded or have been programmed into us.
Mm-hmm.
And those get piled on top of each other. And so there's a lot of excavating to do.
Yeah, that's interesting. And what about the Eastern concept of like samskaras that you bring into this life? Do you work with that at all? Like I'm not talking about past life stuff particularly, but like broad arc energy, right? So you bring into stuff that's epigenetic, or may not be a belief that you picked up, but is literally part and parcel of the arc of your life.
Well, speaking of epigenetics, we know that trauma, for example, can be passed down through 4 generations, even if those next generations aren't traumatized. Right. So that's a part of it. That's the biological part. If there's we deal with a lot of memories and experiences that don't seem to come from this lifetime. We don't have an opinion about it or a philosophy about it or a belief about it. We just say it's stuff that comes up. Let's work with that stuff that just came up.
Same thing with like addiction patterns. A lot of addiction can be multi-generational, a physiological issue that there's no belief around, right?
There's usually trauma. There's usually trauma at the core. And that trauma may be the child's, it may be the parents that pass down into the child, it may be a whole multi-generations that have experienced that. And addiction is really just the solution to another problem.
Right.
Like, if I do this, I won't feel as bad.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so from a process perspective, you're working with a client and you use some of these tools to kind of uncover a trauma related belief that's triggering some behaviors that are unsavory. What do we do now? I mean, you mentioned shining the light of awareness, and I've heard that, that's the first step. And sometimes, that's enough for people, but most of the time it's not. So what do we do? How do we clear these beliefs?
I'll give you a great example. I was working with a multimillionaire, and he was a multimillionaire because he made millions and lost millions and made millions and lost millions over and over again.
That's a great one.
And he couldn't figure out why he wasn't able to just, maintain his wealth. And so he came to me and he said, "This is my problem." And I said, "Okay, let's do the work." And I began taking him back into his past, which is one of the things I do, looking for the source material. And we got down to an experience that he suddenly remembered. This had not been in his conscious mind at all, but he suddenly remembered being 3 years old, walking on the streets of New York with his mother, hand in hand. And he saw a shiny penny on the ground, and he got very excited, and he reached down to grab the penny, and his mother jerked him back and said, "Don't touch that, it's dirty." And he suddenly realized in that moment that the reason he couldn't hold on to his millions was because it was dirty and he shouldn't touch it.
Interesting.
That's an example of the kinds of things that we can find, source material. Now, once we find that, sometimes the light of awareness just blows it apart completely. Mm-hmm. He didn't have to lose money after that. But then we have processes. Let's say the belief is there's something wrong with me. We have specific processes. We use guided imagery, voice dialogue, many different technologies to help the person go back and change that old belief out for a new belief. First, you have to clear the belief from all the systems of the psyche, from that multidimensional self that we are. And then you have open space, and you can then create a new belief in its place. Mm-hmm. It's sort of like if you wanted to garden, you wouldn't take seeds and throw them on rocky, weedy ground. Mm-hmm. You wouldn't grow much. That's what affirmations are. I'll just say some nice things about myself, and maybe something will take.
Some sticks, yeah.
Exactly. But if you were a serious gardener, you'd first clear the rocks and weeds, amend the soil, make a good place for those seeds. Then you'd plant them in the right way at the right time and water and nurture them. And then they'd be able to grow and blossom and fruit. So that was the discovery I made, is that we have to clear the old stuff first, and then we can create a new belief. And then when it's planted, it just naturally blossoms. It's not fighting against all the other old beliefs that were there before. It's not fighting against the weeds that were planted earlier than that. So that's the process. It's a process of clearing. The process can take 20 minutes to an hour. We clear the belief that we've discovered through finding the core belief.
So
then we replace it with a positive belief. And the person from that point is living in that belief instead of the old one.
And then they've got to water it by nurturing it and, doing things that support the new belief as opposed to like backtracking or,
Right. It is what happens is that because it is so deeply,
the patterns they're deep. You don't overcome the pattern right away. You can change the belief and the pattern might still be there. It's like a flywheel. It's going to, it takes a while to slowly spin down.
Here's my philosophy. You actually can clear it completely and quickly. And then it's not there anymore. The pattern disappears along with the belief when you clear it completely, because the pattern was made of the belief. All of a sudden, people feel the weight lifted off their shoulders.
Is that what you meant by clearing it from all the different aspects of your being? You used a different term, but so let's talk a little bit more about that. So like, how do we clear it out? If you have a belief that's cognized, how do you clear it from your body?
Well,
like I know I've used EMDR and that's been effective for like nervous system release, but what do you do? How do you clear it from the body?
Name a belief, and we can talk about a specific one. What's a belief that you have that you haven't been able to clear? Very personal.
Well, I had an issue with abundance because my father, even though we had a family business and we lived in a big house, like there was always lack, and like we couldn't get the Big Mac. We had to get the single burger without cheese on it, that kind of thing. And so it took me a while to override that. It's similar to your millionaire story, but different, and different reason. So that belief, I guess you'd say, was scarcity.
Good. So one of the techniques we use is called the give back ceremony. So a lot of our beliefs were given to us by our parents.
That's right.
Because of their circumstances and their beliefs and their philosophy of life and their culture. And so we have a process in which we feel the belief. Let's say, there's not enough money. That's the core belief, right? There's not enough money. And so we go into the subconscious mind, the imaginal realm, the place where we dream and we imagine. Because to the brain, the imagination is pretty much like experience. The brain doesn't have a big distinction between what we imagine and what we experience. That's why imaginal works so well. So we go in and we actually feel that lack in our bodies. There's the physicality of it. We then use a process to visualize what it looks like, that belief there's not enough money. And then we bring in the emotion. What does it feel like to not have enough money? How has it impacted you throughout your life? What decisions have you made? So we're bringing in all the different aspects of self. And then we take it off. We tell people to just take it off and let it fall to the ground as a physicalized, imaginal thing. And then we bring mother and father into the space and we pick that crap up. We walk over to them and say, Mom, Dad, you gave me this belief. It's not mine. It was never mine. I don't want it or need it anymore, and I'm giving it back to you. And then we have a ceremony in which we give it back to them and send them off with it. Now, what that does is it takes it out of all of those systems inside of us and hands it back to who they belong to. And now you've created space. When you clear something that's old, you've got created space. Now you get to decide, what seed do I want to plant? Life is abundant. I look around and I see millions of leaves on trees. The trees don't talk to each other and say, hey, it's a bad economy. Let's make less apples. So now we can see the evidence that was there all the time, but that belief was in the way.
Right.
So now we have a different experience of life and we can feel it. We feel it. We see it. We imagine it. We can make decisions based on it. So it is a complete shift. It's a true transformation. caterpillar to butterfly.
Yeah. I think it'd be helpful for listeners to kind of differentiate between what you're talking about and hypnotherapy and like neurolinguistic programming, because, you know, these different modalities really all kind of overlap, and some of them, you know, are almost quite similar, just called something different. So what's your perspective on hypnotherapy and like NLP versus or compared to what you're talking about or we're talking about?
Yeah, first of all, I've never studied NLP or hypnotherapy,
Okay.
but I've trained over 600 people around the world in 45 countries,
Mm-hmm.
and many of them have been NLP masters and NLP trainers and hypnotherapists, you know, and
Sure.
and all. And so they come and take my training because it's an integrated training,
Got it.
and they all say, "Wow, there's a lot of similarities, but I learned things I didn't know. It integrated everything I knew before, and now I've got a complete system."
Right.
So we encourage people to come learn the training, learn the techniques, and then take them into their own lives and integrate them with the other stuff that works that they know. It just happens to make everything work better because it's got an underpinning of scientific and philosophical foundation that everything else builds on. Like it took me 45 years to figure this stuff out. And so I've basically put everything I know into the training, an understanding of how mind works, not, you know, the mind and our mind.
Yeah, yeah.
How our experience works to become our beliefs and how to clear them.
Yeah. And we certainly share that notion that integration, whether you're talking about clearing up your past or developing a better future, is really important. And our whole culture has been one of disintegration. And you know, the whole scientific materialistic kind of parsing everything out to a gnat's ass and breaking it down into smaller and smaller, you know, domains of knowledge, and then making a whole thing out of that. And then people have built entire systems out of these little tiny niches that it's really confusing for people, and it leads to this really disconnected, almost fractured sense of existence. And then, of course, just living in our fast-paced culture just exacerbates that. So reintegration or integration, which includes healing the past and identifying who you want to be in the future and working in those modalities, right, is really powerful. And I applaud your work. It's fantastic. Let's kind of pan out a little bit. You work with a lot of people, a lot of really successful people and who want to be better, you know, and that's not common, as you know, like, you know, people who are successful who want to be even more whole, that's the holy grail, right? So it's awesome. Yet we have this like enormous challenges going on in our culture, right? COVID, you know, the great resignation, VUCA world, accelerating technology, concerns about war and nuclear weapons and environmental degradation. I mean, all, you know, the list goes on.
The world's a mess.
It seems like it's a mess. Is it really a mess, or is this just like kind of part of the human condition that we always think we're right on the edge of fucking everything going to hell in a handbasket, including our own lives? And we've got to do something to fix it. Because it seems to me that's part of our story. Like that's just baked into our story. And it always has been baked into our story. Because you could also make the claim that everything is in perfect balance. And you know, we are the creators of our own universe. So there's not one world out there. There's a consensus world, but there's 8 billion worlds created by 8 billion different minds and consciousnesses. So my world is pretty damn good. I don't see things going to hell in a handbasket, right? So I'm just curious what your take is on this. Is that baked into the human psyche to think that everything's fucked up and we got to fix it? Or is everything really fucked up and we got to fix it?
Well, if we look back at our evolution, that's a really good question. If we look back at our evolution, you know, back in the days of, you know, 16,000 years ago, when humans were walking around and changing continents, you know, they were dealing with an ice age, and they were dealing with mastodons, and they were dealing with saber-toothed tigers, and saber-toothed tigers were real. And if you didn't look out, you were going to get eaten. And going back further to monkeys and apes, if you got pushed out of the troop, you were dead meat. So the idea of belonging and figuring out how do I be in this social system was crucial. And later humans, how do I be in this environment and make it safe So these ideas of looking around and seeing the problems and then solving them was crucial to our development as humans.
Right.
So that's baked in, is our ability to see where the problems are and then to solve them. Now,
But I agree with that. And that's kind of supporting what I'm saying. So we're always looking for problems.
Yeah.
Instead of looking to see that everything's okay.
Well, my favorite saying that I've heard is things are getting better and better and worse in more and more places, faster and faster.
Or at least we perceive it, because ultimately time is a construct as well. That's just part of the mental makeup, right?
Well, that's good to say if you can see it that way. Most people can't.
That's right.
Most people are living in the time stream and they don't have that perspective. Once you get that perspective, it's much easier to say those kinds of things.
Right.
But for most people, they're struggling with their daily life. They're in survival. They're trying to do the best they can. They're trying to be successful. And they do have real problems because the culture does not support them in being who they are, giving their gifts to the world. The culture's when I just had the flash of an alligator. The culture is an alligator chomping at your heels with big sharp teeth, and you're trying to outrun it. Yeah, exactly. So there are cultural issues, there are social issues, there are environmental issues. These things are real. It's just that we've got more and more and more information about them that's coming in faster and faster, and now we get to the place where we're overwhelmed. Because it used to be that change happened seasonally. Okay, it's spring, let's plant.
I agree with that.
So
the good news is like that, just that awareness of this conversation can point to, a big issue that a lot of people are having, and that's overwhelm, which is a story, a belief that can be deconstructed and cleared up.
It's a real experience.
Well, it's experience based upon a belief.
Well, also
because the information, the belief is that you have to be plugged into that information, right? You have to, be up on it, right? You have to keep. That's a story. I haven't had TV in my house in 25 years. I don't watch network news. I don't plug into the news every day. I don't experience that speed because I recognize that story as false. That's not my story, and it's not my need. It's the need of the consumers and the government to just pump all that information. And they say, people couldn't imagine not having a TV and having it on all the time. That's his story.
Yes, that's true.
It leads to this unnecessary sense of overwhelm.
Okay, I like what you're saying. And overwhelm is an actual physiological experience. There is too much information coming in right now. This happens in trauma too. Trauma is overwhelming the nervous system, which is meant to handle one thing at a time. Suddenly, I'm being beaten within an inch of my life, and it's overwhelming my ability to handle it. So overwhelm is an actual feeling. Does it come from the media and everything else? Sure. Is it a belief that you need media? Sure. But I want to acknowledge that the overwhelm is real for people's experience, and they can make different choices.
Well, any belief is going to lead to some sort of physiological experience.
Yes.
Right, because it's going to affect your body. It's going to trigger your sympathetic nervous system. It's going to do, it's going to cause all sorts of hormonal changes or imbalances. So I agree with you. I'm just kind of pointing out that it's a choice. When you can begin to dissemble a belief, you start to see the choice that you have now as an autonomous adult to be able to what information you choose to take in, for instance, with this overwhelm.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was
not to take that information in. You can choose to declutter your life. You can choose to say no to all these commitments, and suddenly, wow.
Here's the problem.
Goes away.
Here's the problem with that. You, like a lot of people that I work with, have a very strong and powerful will, and you can make choices from that place of will. Right. Most people don't have that strong a will because their will has been stripped from them from a very early age.
Right.
And so they're operating mostly on automatic. And so when you say to somebody who's operating on automatic, hey, you could just make a different choice, it's not helpful because they can't.
This is why probably cognitive behavioral therapy doesn't work for a lot of people.
Yeah. Yeah.
You can't just say, hey, change your behaviors because this is. Yeah, I agree with that.
Exactly. So both our goals is to expand awareness of who we are, what we're made of, what the machinery is, and then you can start having choice. Then you can start having different experiences because you don't have to operate on the old patterns that have been there your whole life.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Lion, this is a great conversation. I got to wrap it up. So I've got to move on here, and I know you do too, but so do you have a website and social media, and I know your book is Clear Your Beliefs. Where can people reach out and find more about you?
I have a few websites. Clearbeliefs.com is my training website if people are interested in learning my methodology. I have a personal website, liongoodman.com, where people can get coaching. And then social media, just look up Lion Goodman and you'll get way too much information. And it's
Lion, Lion Goodman. Yeah. Awesome, Lion. This has been a great conversation. I'd love to follow up and chat with you more. And you know, you're doing great work. I really appreciate it. And we'll keep on changing some beliefs and maybe co-creating a better consensus reality.
It's a great quest, and I'm happy to be on it with you.
Absolutely.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, hooyah. Thank you very much.